If you're in the market for a tile placement strategy game that's under the theme of a city builder, then Tilelands may well be a great game for you. I picked this up on Steam last week as part of its release because it was cheap and cheerful and it looked very pastel and clean and inviting. And I have to say, it is. This game doesn't explain very much at all, actually, and I found that quite frustrating that the tutorial kind of stops at the point where it becomes useful, and so I've had to spend quite a lot of time understanding some of the mechanics of this game that the game doesn't explain particularly well. Now, that to me leads me to a question of, is this game actually well balanced? And the answer is, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm having fun finding out, so make of that what you will. In this game, you're given a 7x7 grid of blank tiles that you can then use to build out your city. Inside there will be 3 randomly placed monuments, and these act as linchpins and starter points really for your game, because you can only place a tile next to a tile that's already placed. So, on the right hand side you'll have various different tiles that you can then place, and they'll be of different types of terrain or cities or like mines or camps or something like that. Oceans in there too, and when you hover over them it will give you what they can do basically in your city and what points they will score, because the main thing here is that the only way how you can generate more tiles is to satisfy certain conditions with certain tiles that you've already placed, or when they convert to points on the top of the screen you're earning points and levelling up, and every time you level up you get another set of tiles, another 10. So the gap between the points and the levelling up gets wider and wider and wider, which means that you have to expand and evolve your city over time and get it into a position where it's generating lots of passive point scoring, and that's really quite tricky to do, especially when the game doesn't tell you too much about how to do it. So, examples of this will be if you lay down an ocean tile and then surround it by meadows and forests, it will then turn into a lake, which is like an evolved version of that. If you place 4 buildings next to each other, they'll zoop up into one and become a city. If you lay down some farming tiles, then they might generate some livestock, or they might generate hay that you can then put into some of the different like farming areas, which can be quite helpful. And you can also have like mountain tiles that rain once every 5 turns, and if you place desert wasteland tiles next to them, they'll flood into oases, taking a tile that scores nothing to a tile that then scores 15 points. All of the tiles have their own unique like spins to it too, so the more you place consecutive forest tiles next to each other, the more points they continually score, so that you've got a massive forest area that can score like 30 points when you place stuff down. The problem is that as you do that, you're then squeezing out the chance to do much else scoring elsewhere, so you really have to balance all of the different ecosystems, and there's not enough room on the map for all of them, and that's the whole point of Tilelands. Working with what you've got, trying to make the best of what you've got to try and stay alive as long as possible before you reach a game over by spending all of your tiles before you can level up again. Now, as you're dealing with all of this, the other kind of secondary part of this game is the workers. Some tiles will generate workers, and they might be barbarian camps, for example. It could be from the city side that generates workers, and these kind of have a stamina of wandering around the map randomly. And wherever they stop, they'll then run out of energy and can often turn a place to be an upgraded version of itself. So if a worker stops on a meadow, for example, and runs out of steam, then you can convert that into a park. A park is useful because that will earn points passively because it's considered a place of natural beauty. If you have a worker that then stops, say, on the mountains, that can then turn it into a mine, which can then generate more resources, which can then upgrade some of the other buildings elsewhere. The problem with this is that there is always an amount of RNG as to A, whether the workers come in at all, B, whether they'll ever actually land where you want them to, because that's entirely like in the lap of the gods. And so sometimes you're just watching things just miss everything that you need it to do, and you're totally out of power to be able to manipulate that, apart from placing more of those tiles down. However, the tiles that you get at the beginning and every time you level up are randomly generated, so you're having to really deal with the cards that you've got as and when they come across, and you're like, meh. As a result, there are some tiles that I've been playing for a couple of hours and I've never ever seen, because I've never been able to get into a position where I can actually upgrade my tiles in that way, because nothing ever quite aligns in the stars to enable me to do so. And I find that quite frustrating. And I think the main takeaway that I've got from Tile Lands is that I really enjoy the aesthetic and the idea of this game, and largely it works quite well, but there's too much that you can't control and too much RNG luck that plays into whether or not your run is absolutely going to be a god tier top of the leaderboard run or not. And I find it fascinating on the online leaderboards that there's just one single person that's got a score that's 10 times more than everyone else's, and I'm there kind of around 7th to 10th, and we're all kind of peaking out at almost exactly the same point, and then no one's able to get too far beyond that, which I just find interesting because it feels unnaturally short to kind of conk out that early. So yeah, I do think Tile Lands probably needs a little bit of balancing, a little bit of putting more control back into the player so that you can make better decisions and feel like you're in control of your run a bit more. But this is a rough gem potentially in waiting. So I'd probably say to a lot of people, pop this on your wish list and watch out for some potential improvements coming later on down the line if they ever do come. However, if this still appeals to you, I have had fun despite what I've said about all of those frustrations. So take the punt. It was only just over £2, which is really, really low stakes for a game like this to still get a couple of hours of fun out of it. So yeah. Written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com. Any comments or questions, leave them down below. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.